Good evening and welcome. Let's start with our top story that we are tracking for you. Washington, D.C. has organized a trilateral meeting with the Foreign Minister of Israel and the United Arab Emirates. The Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, held two separate bilaterals within a trilateral setting. Now, the three foreign ministers held a joint media briefing after the trilateral meeting. Apart from the strengthening of interrelationships, the talks have covered the rising concerns of Iran's nuclear ambitions and China's global aspirations. Chinese companies have continued to bid on Israeli infrastructure projects. Foreign Minister Yair Lapid has announced that Israel reserves rights to use force on Iran and has claimed that Iran is trying to cheat the world. Meanwhile, the UAE has spoken about Yemen, saying that the people of Yemen have a right to a better life. This meeting comes just days ahead of the Abraham Accords anniversary, as the Biden administration seeks to expand a normalization drive. Blinken met Israel's Foreign Minister Yair Lapid, followed by the UAE's Foreign Minister Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Washington, D.C. has organized a trilateral meeting with the foreign ministers of Israel and the United Arab Emirates. The Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has held two separate bilateral meetings within the trilateral setting. Now, the three foreign ministers have held this joint media briefing after the meeting, and apart from the strengthening of the interrelationships, the talks have covered a range of issues, including the rising concerns of Iran's nuclear ambitions, as well as China's global aspirations. Now, this says Chinese companies have continued to bid on Israeli infrastructure projects. Foreign Minister of Israel, Yair Lapid, has announced that Israel reserves its rights to use force on Iran and has claimed that Iran is trying to cheat the world. Meanwhile, the UAE has spoken about the issues in Yemen, saying that the people of Yemen have a right to a better life. Now, this meeting comes just days ahead of the anniversary of the Abraham Accords, as the Biden administration seeks to expand normalization drive. Now, for more on this, we're being joined by our correspondent, Susan Tehrani, live from New York. Good evening to you, Susan. Now, can you please take us through the agenda of the meeting? We know there has been talk of Iran and China, and as the foreign minister of the UAE mentioned, Yemen. What else did the foreign ministers discuss?
A wide range of regional issues, as you mentioned, and it was interesting to note that this is a significant meeting considering the fact that it's the first of its kind since 2020 when the Abraham Accord was signed, really the normalization agreement that Israel struck between Bahrain and the UAE, aside from Iran and China and regional issues really being at the forefront and the main focus. We have two trilateral working groups regarding religious coexistence that will be taking place as well. Issues related to water and energy is also on the agenda. And of course, this is something, a group that's very coordinated and interested in working on economic cooperation as well. And that won't be off the table, definitely, as well. So we're waiting to hear a lot more from readouts and announcement coming out from the three sides. But for now, that is what we know.
Right, Susan, this meeting comes just 2 days ahead of the anniversary of the signing of the original Abraham Accords. Will we be seeing more bilaterals with other signatory countries ahead?
Absolutely, not only with more signatory countries ahead, but also we see how much the previous administration, the Trump administration, who really spearheaded this accord, is banking on this for the Republican Party. U.S. Secretary of State, former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will be traveling to Israel on the anniversary of the signing of the Abraham Accord, along with Jared Kushner, who was White House advisor, who was very instrumental in getting this accord signed. Later, before the end of the year, during the anniversary of this signing, really trying to hone in on the message that how important this is for the Republican Party, considering the fact that, just a side note, the Republicans had been hammering on the Biden administration that he wasn't fast enough in the 7 months that he has been president in really progressively working to strengthen this treaty between countries. And the reason that this meeting is really being taken place, it wasn't on the part of Antony Blinken, but it was the ministers from the UAE and Israel who wanted this meeting to take place, this trilateral summit. And so now we're seeing that, the Biden administration is trying to really hone on this and strengthen this relationship and bank on the Abraham Accords. So not only is it very important for the countries that are involved, it's also very important domestically for the Democrats as well. Remember, the Democrats didn't have a very good relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu. This is an opportunity, a clean slate for them to also have a better relationship with a new Israeli government in that country as well. So a lot is at stake. Yes, we will be seeing a lot more bilaterals and a lot more meetings after this, but we'll also be seeing a lot more perhaps engagement on the part of the United States and Israel moving forward from both parties as well.
Absolutely. Susan, thank you very much for bringing us all the latest coming out of those trilaterals.